Einen schönen guten Tag. Wir begrüßen Sie erneut aus der Hessischen Landesvertretung hier in Berlin für eine weitere Diskussion in der Reihe Was bedeutet das Coronavirus für die Europäische Union? Schön, dass Sie wieder dabei sind. Mein Name ist Christoph von Marschall. Ich bin der diplomatische Korrespondent der Chefredaktion des Tagesspiegels, der Zeitung, die hier in Berlin erscheint. Und heute schauen wir ins Baltikum. Geografisch ist das ein gewaltiger Sprung von Portugal, unserem Gastland, in der vergangenen Woche, also vom Südwesten der Europäischen Union jetzt in den Nordosten. Unser Gast ist die lettische Botschafterin Inga Skujiņa. Wir werden das Gespräch auf Englisch führen und ich kann Ihnen schon verraten, die baltischen Staaten sind einfallsreich und experimentierfreudig. In Lettland können Sie zum Beispiel Ihren Corona-Test an einem Automaten machen und in manchen Laboren erledigen Roboter die Testarbeit. Zunächst begrüßt sie Hessens Staatsministerin für Bundes- und Europaangelegenheiten, Lucia Puttrich.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Zuschauerinnen und Zuschauer, ich begrüße Sie ganz herzlich zu einer weiteren Folge unserer Reihe One Click to Europe. Wir beschäftigen uns mit der Frage, was das Coronavirus für die Europäische Union bedeutet. Heute haben wir die lettische Botschafterin zu Gast. Der Blick auf Lettland lohnt sich. Lettland ist ein kleiner Mitgliedstaat, er hat eine besondere Lage ganz oben im Nordosten der Europäischen Union und spielt deshalb auch eine besondere Rolle. Lassen Sie mich aber erst zum Coronavirus kommen. Uns interessiert, wie geht Lettland mit der Situation um? In einer Zeit, in der das eigene Land bedroht ist, in der wir unsere Bevölkerung schützen wollen, in dem Reisen nicht in der Art und Weise möglich ist, wie wir es eigentlich gerne tun würden. Wie weit ist Lettland zum Beispiel mit den Impfungen? Wie weit ist Lettland mit den Testungen? Wir sagen immer impfen, 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 testen, testen, testen. Und können wir nun ein Licht im Tunnel sehen und können wir bald damit rechnen, dass wir uns innerhalb der Europäischen Union schneller wieder aufeinander zubewegen können? Und welche wirtschaftlichen Folgen hat das Coronavirus für Lettland? Wo hinein wird Lettland investieren, wenn wir darüber reden, dass wir einen Wiederaufbau vorhaben und in Dinge investieren wollen, die uns weiter voranbringen? Wie sieht es mit der Digitalisierung aus? Wie weit ist Lettland bei technischen Möglichkeiten? Also eine ganze Reihe von Fragen, die uns interessieren. Und uns interessiert natürlich auch, in welcher Situation sich Lettland im Moment befindet aufgrund der geografischen Lage und der politischen Lage. Belarus ist nicht weit, Russland ist nicht weit und der Blick von Lettland auf unsere östlichen Nachbarstaaten ist anders als von Staaten, die weit weg von dort sind. Insofern haben wir auch besondere Herausforderungen, die uns geostrategisch beschäftigen. Und da müssen wir gute und starke und verlässliche Partner für Lettland innerhalb der Europäischen Union sein. Insofern bin ich mit Ihnen gespannt auf den heutigen Blick nach Lettland, bedanke mich ganz herzlich bei Herrn Dr. von Marschall, der mit Sicherheit wieder die richtigen Fragen stellen wird und freue mich mit Ihnen auf eine gute Veranstaltung. Herzlich willkommen.
Herzlichen Dank, Frau Puttrich. Also eine ganze Reihe von Aspekten, die uns heute interessieren, wenn wir über Lettland sprechen. Wir werden gleich ins Englische wechseln. Falls einige von Ihnen damit Mühe haben, kann ich Sie schon vorweg trösten. Auch dieses Gespräch mit der lettischen Botschafterin wird schon bald auf dem YouTube-Kanal Hessen in Berlin und Europa mit deutscher Übersetzung zu finden sein. Dort finden Sie auch weitere Folgen unserer Gespräche über die Europäische Union in der Corona-Krise, falls Sie noch einmal nachhören wollen, wie sich die Reihe entwickelt hat seit dem Auftakt im vergangenen Mai mit der französischen Botschafterin Anne-Marie Descottes. Frau Botschafterin, die Einführung mache ich noch auf Deutsch. Sie sind in den Jahren des Kalten Kriegs und der Ost-West-Teilung Europas geboren und aufgewachsen. Doch als Sie Ihr Studium begannen, waren die Mauer, der Ostblock und die kommunistischen Diktaturen bereits Geschichte. Sie haben Architektur und internationale Beziehungen studiert in Lettland und in Stockholm in Schweden. Dann haben Sie 2 Jahre als Journalistin gearbeitet bei der Tageszeitung Diena, wo auch ein Freund von mir damals arbeitete, Einar Stiemans. Und dann sind Sie in den diplomatischen Dienst gewechselt. In Ihrer Karriere im Außenministerium hatten Sie viel mit internationalen Organisationen zu tun, der OSZE, der NATO, der Europäischen Union, unter anderem während der lettischen Ratspräsidentschaft. Denn so lange sind Sie ja schon in der Europäischen Union, dass Sie auch schon mal die Ratspräsidentschaft inne hatten. Now let's switch to English. Ambassador, we always start these Europe talks with the state of the corona situation in the given country of our guest. In the first wave in spring and summer of last year, Latvia had only a small number of cases. This has dramatically changed in autumn and in winter. The number of new cases per 100,000 in 7 days rose over 200 in January. Since then, numbers have gone down a bit, but they are still dangerously high. The German government warns against any travel to Latvia. What was the reason for this corona spike?
Yeah, first, thank you very much for this kind invitation, and I'm so happy to be back here in Hessische Landesvertretung, because that was back in 2017 when we celebrated our National Day in November here with many friends around, so nearly 200 people in this very room. So therefore, from today's perspective, it is indeed sad that we have to meet these challenges. And as you rightly said, the situation is pretty worrisome in my country, like in many other countries. So that's if I would have a crystal ball, or my government would have a crystal ball, then the answer would be easy. So I think it's rather clear that the corona pandemic, so it goes in waves in different countries. Also in Latvia. Last year, I think that Latvia was so to say, corona came in later than in other countries. Probably we travel less, or probably we're more north. So nobody knows why. It's worse now than it was worse, and it was better then. So, But these days, yeah, the government takes different kind of measures, a lot of efforts, so to stand against and fight against the corona. So people are tired, also like here in Germany. Economies suffer, and we have to be indeed very inventive. Testing, we're raising our capacities as much as we can. It's not to compare Germany in size and inhabitants number to Latvia, but we have more than 10,000 tests per day. It's 12,000, 40,000. We have 100.9 million inhabitants, which means so the percentage is very high. So vaccination, it takes its speed. So in January, like also here in Germany, so it was a gradual process. Now it's better and better every day. So
also the minister asked about the vaccination development. Do you get enough vaccines, and are people ready to take the vaccines? Do you have some skepticism? How does it work in comparison to here?
It's very similar. I have no dramatic news or information to reveal here. It's very much like in Germany. So first of all, there was in December, everybody was happy to learn that Europe has accredited the first vaccine. Then soon 2 others followed. So and there was a little bit of euphoria that we have a light in the end of tunnel. So I think we spoke and explained people too little that to set up the production process, the deliveries, so that might take time. Then, of course, we had this unfortunate surprise from AstraZeneca announcing that there would be less vaccines than agreed by contracts, and so it's. I think we're in an unprecedented situation when every day we have good news and every day we have bad news. We have enormous amount of information around us, and for people it's very difficult to decide what is correct and what is not correct. So we're learning, all of us. People are learning, governments are learning.
Ambassador, how does the lockdown looks like in Latvia? Is it very similar to Germany? Are there differences? Are schools open or closed? How is digital homeschooling working? What about shops, restaurants, barber shops? Can people walk outside? How is the situation in Latvia?
Unfortunately, it looks very much like here in Germany. Schools are closed, shops are closed. You can buy only the food and basic stuff and necessary things. So schools are gradually opening up. We have decided to go for the regional approach. So in those regions where we have lower level of corona, so for first to fourth grade students, school students, we open schools up. The rest stay home. So online learning, it's there. But the thing is that it works for a week, 2 weeks, months, 2 months. People get tired. We're human beings, and children are human beings. Of course, it is so difficult for them to stay at home. And again, like here in Germany, there are more and more discussions about the emotional and psychological well-being of people, especially school students. So I think we will go forward with this regional approach when it comes to schooling, and we will see if figures will allow us to open our economy a little bit.
Yeah.
But today everybody stays at home.
Yeah, and spring and sun and higher temperatures coming in the north of Europe a little bit later than in the south. That's also a difference. Latvia in general has a specific geographic situation. Your country borders with Estonia and Lithuania, both EU members, but as well with Russia and Belarus. We will talk later about the political aspects of this neighborhood. For the moment, I would like to ask about the influence of this neighborhood on the pandemic. Are incidences in Russia higher or lower? Officially, they are lower, but do Latvians trust official Russian statistics? And on the other hand, would Latvians like to get the Sputnik vaccine since the European rollout is rather slow? How are these feelings towards these big neighbors under pandemic conditions?
Well, I will start with Sputnik. I think the answer is very easy in a way. It's not accredited on the EU level. And I think there is no further discussion until it's done, if and when. Okay. So also, well, Latvia, like any other EU member state, we follow decisions taken on the European level vis-a-vis third countries. So I think policies are clear. And there is little to discuss, so to say, on national level, because it is discussed in Brussels, so among all the member states. Well, no doubt, we're a bordering country, and we follow carefully what is the real situation, and colleagues, diplomats in our embassy in Moscow keep reporting. So no doubt that the disinformation, fake news, propaganda these days, it's not our friend. It doesn't help us to decide, as I said earlier, so what is right and what is wrong. And also in our case, I think it doesn't differ from Germany. So we have to sit and carefully analyze what is what and what kind of information is provided. But yes, well, we know our neighbor, and we have a our experience and check twice before you decide. That's our approach.
But what is your feeling of incidences in Russia and Belarus higher than in Latvia, or is that a sort of risk, or are they managing their situation better? How do you think the real situation is?
Like others, I can follow the information which is provided publicly. So figures are, the situation is pretty bad also in Russia. That depends very much what are the priorities of any government, let it be in Latvia, Germany, or Russia. Well, I think in many countries, fight against corona pandemic is a priority number one, or I have to say, admit the first and only priority. So.
I was asking because neighborhoods clearly matter. We see it at the German-French border, we see it at the border with Austria. When there are hotspots like in Tyrol for skiing, then we feel it a few weeks later in Germany because people were traveling there. And so the virus, I think the important thing is we all have to know the virus knows no border. The virus is crossing the border. And on the other hand, every country has to come to terms with its national situation. And the EU as a whole is challenged. And that leads to the next question. How is Latvia experiencing this mix of national responsibility, neighborhood, European solidarity? Are the national measures complemented by European solidarity, or do you rather experience a lack of this kind of European solidarity?
Well, I think that these days we have more European solidarity than ever, because we have clearly understood that without unity and solidarity, that we cannot work, we cannot function, and that's our great privilege we have. And a little bit stepping back to your previous question or comment, again, I think we're privileged within the European Union that we have these discussions. Yes, the corona pandemic goes in waves in a way, and figures are from day to day better or worse in different countries, and countries introduce national measures. At the same time, we work hard to have a united approach against border crossing and traveling, and how our economies function, or what kind of measures we take. With Russia, our border is an external border, and there is a different approach. So with or without corona pandemic. So I think we have to make a distinguish. Make a difference
between
here.
internal
and external borders.
Yeah,
so that's about visas, and that's about many other bureaucratic and formal things. Of course, it works differently than in case of the European Union. But back to your question on solidarity. I think that last summer, after long and difficult discussions, the very, very important decisions on European level had been taken as regards our economies, so that we support each other, we help each other, and European different kinds of European funds and had been established as new instruments. So I think this all helps. It helps for national governments to take their decisions more freely and future-oriented. So this is, I think, our solidarity is very important. We highly value also that there was a joint vaccine procurement. I think that is very important, that we do not compete. We support each other, because, as you rightly said, so the virus has no borders. So and it wouldn't help us to fight and have zero figures in one country and then and bad situation in another country.
Yeah, we should not compete when it comes to the question who gets what. On the other hand, we should surely compete when it comes to invention, to modernization. Latvia is a relatively small country. You already mentioned it. It's almost 2 million inhabitants. In Germany, we have 40 times that many people. But your country has proven to be very inventive in the pandemic. Latvia had the first corona tracing app in the European Union last June. A Latvian businessman offers in Riga an automat for contactless corona testing. If I'm not mistaken, Latvia has now even robots for the laboratory part of the testing in order to reduce the risk of infection. What are your thoughts why a small country like Latvia is more inventive in this respect in the pandemic than a resourceful big country like Germany?
Well, I think the list you named, I could go on and continue that our parliament was, I think, the first one that fully switched to remote daily work and also voting. So, of course, it required long discussions whether our constitution that was written 100 years ago foresees such situations. But nevertheless, and given circumstances, we had to be inventive, and our government worked remotely for quite some time. Also, the e-schooling, so it works well. Technically, it works very well. So. What makes difference between big and small countries, or Latvia and Germany? I tell this example always. We don't have a BMW factory in Latvia. We do not produce Mercedes or Audi. So we have to be. But therefore, we have to be quick and inventive. So we have to find our niches. We have to be niche-oriented, flexible, and fast. And this is what we have found. People are very creative. People are very much future-oriented. So, and I think this gives us a lot of privilege and the startups movement or startups business or policy in all these directions, it's it's developed, it's supported from our government, the state. The legislation is favorable towards startups, and many young people feel motivated to come up with their ideas. And here we are. So because all these fantastic things you mentioned, they have started with just one or two or a small group of people coming together and saying, yeah, we have an idea. And then you don't have a bureaucracy behind, you just create the product. And then you come up and say, here it is. And it's often interesting for governments, for our government, for example, the tracing application. It's interesting for other governments because I have to admit that many startups or the many ideas and products of Latvian startups has been brought further and in production in many other countries, including Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our tracing app was not working very well for different reasons, so we are not so successful at the moment. But what you mentioned is there's a different mix economic mix for the GDP. At the moment, right now, we have a discussion in the headlines whether the EU should quickly introduce a so-called electronic digital vaccine pass in order to make it easier when people are vaccinated to travel. This is pushed, of course, for business travel, but also by countries which are very much dependent on tourism. And normally when we think about tourism, we think about Spain and Italy and Greece. And it was an idea of the Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis already in January. So how is your view on this? Should we quickly have a digital EU vaccination pass, or do you rather share the concern that people say here in Germany sometimes, oh, that's not fair if some people, just because they're vaccinated, have more travel rights than others? What are your thoughts on that?
This will be another very difficult discussion because it is about, two problems. First of all, in a way, it is a kind of discrimination. What do we do about those people that cannot be vaccinated because of different reasons, health problems, what do we tell them? So it's kind of discrimination. That's first thing. Second thing. Legal issues. Who decides? How decides? And also, that's a difficult issue of communication, because many will tell you back that, many people will say that it's a hidden way how to impose a mandatory vaccination. So I think it might be a very difficult issue of, again, how to communicate with societies. And indeed, this has been discussed as first of all, to open up the tourism as income area for or business for many countries in the south. That's not only about tourism, that is also about our economies, because recently in some countries, and including in my own country, we had discussions on whether we need to, whether the truck drivers, so to say, need to be tested as well. So, but that's their daily business, and they cross borders back and forth every day or more times per day. So we have a lot of obstacles. So within our economies.
But you're also a tourism country. I mean, it would also help the Latvian GDP if people could travel. What? Please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think tourism is important for the Latvian GDP as well. It's not only the south, Spain and Greece.
Not to compare, of course, Spain and Latvia when it comes to tourism and the importance of these businesses in our GDPs. But certainly, yes, tourism is important, and I think tourism, gastronomy, hotels, these branches, they have suffered most, so to say, from Corona and all the measures introduced. So, and the government is working hard to find solutions and see how we can support. So there is a little we can do when figures are so high. But again, I think the issue of vaccination pass is very much related to the trust, public trust of people's trust, and communication. So I think it's not an easy question. Yeah. Coming back to our economy. There are several branches that suffered a lot. Already mentioned those. At the same time, we touched upon digital branches or industries. And what is interesting, that the export has grown during Corona pandemic and in Corona times. So, which means that for some branches, it's not going well. For some, it's going much, much better. Altogether, for our economy, it means that it suffers, probably less than we were afraid. And let's be hopeful and let's be cautious and smart enough to find the right balance. So it's not black and white, and it's certainly not only black.
Yeah. So, Ambassador, time is running, but I would like to touch also on the political aspects of Latvia's neighborhood. In Russia and in Belarus, which are both neighboring countries, we see broad street protests against the official leaders, Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenko. Latvia has a numerous Russian minority. If we take all together, what is the mix of emotions in Latvia towards your eastern neighbors? Sympathy for the protest movement, fear of Russia, and is the EU and are the United States meeting Latvian expectations when it comes to your security situation?
Oh, many questions. Certainly, there is a strong sympathy and support for movements in Russia and Belarus, and I can tell you why. It is very easy for me to answer this question, because it's only 30, slightly plus years ago when we stood up for our independence, for our freedom.
When your country was still part of the Soviet Union, we just have to remind if younger people are among the listeners.
Yeah, that Latvia was occupied for 50 years, and for 50 years Latvia was part of the Soviet Union. And back in late 80s, the people said, enough, we want to be an independent country, we want our freedom back, and we fight it for that, and if you work hard, then dreams come true. So in 1991, Latvia regained its independence, and so I myself was 18, 19, 20 years those days, and I remember that it took a lot of courage from people. Those were not easy days, so that was different. You cannot compare Belarus and Russia and Latvia those days, but nevertheless, feeling, sentiment is there, and there is a strong sympathy and support in Latvia for people in Russia and Belarus, because they have all the rights to enjoy democracy and freedom. They have certainly deserved. And what is not accepted, the brutal violence of the regime against people. I think that is, if processes take place in democratic, peaceful way, then it's one thing. But when there is such a brutality and violence, then it's not acceptable.
And how big or small is the fear of big neighbor Russia, given that you are now a NATO and an EU country?
I think we cannot talk, we do not discuss, we don't speak about fear today. We could dream that we have a neighbor that we could cooperate with and work on daily basis. So it's not the case, unfortunately. But you rightly mentioned, so we're a NATO member. We have EU friends and partners around, and we work all together. So I think what is relatively new around the world today, that's about hybrid warfare, if I may say so. It's about cyber warfare, and it's not only in Latvia, it's also, I think, in Germany. There are cases, had been cases against Bundestag and other examples could be mentioned. So this is our the threat is different today, and it's not only against Latvia, it's against democracy and many democratic countries. So I think
we are almost up with our time, but I can't finish this conversation without mentioning one issue which makes headlines and where Germany is part of it, and that is the German-Russian cooperation these days with the gas pipeline Nord Stream 2. Many EU partners object against this project. What are the thoughts of the government in Riga and Latvian citizens about Nord Stream?
Easy and simple. We had always said that Nord Stream 2 is a project clearly against clearly against geopolitical logic, political logic. We have always said that from our own experience, what is important, there is a diversity of resources, of sources for a different kind of, let it be gas or let it be electricity. So we know how it was and what kind of problems one can have being dependent on just and only one source. And we have worked hard in my country to have a diversity of energy sources. So, and we know that it works and what kind of privileges we have now when we're not dependent on one source. And it surprises us why, you know, there are intentions to go in an opposite direction. That's one thing. I think another very important geopolitical issue, that's about Ukraine, and I will not go in details. Yeah,
Ukraine,
exactly, yeah. And especially in given circumstances when we have a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And also what is important to be mentioned, that's if in Europe we work, we have a Green Deal and we want to modernize our countries, then Nord Stream 2 is clearly against these efforts and strives. So that has been our position since many, many years. We have criticized also Nord Stream 1, and we will not change our position.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think we have to leave it there. It became pretty clear that Latvia, as its neighbors, are not a friend of this German-Russian project, the pipeline Nord Stream 2, and also some of our Western EU partners object against this. Wir verabschieden uns für heute aus der Hessischen Landesvertretung in Berlin. Schon bald können Sie uns wiedersehen, wenn Sie mögen. Im März wird der tschechische Botschafter Tomáš Kafka unser Gast sein. Der ist übrigens nicht nur Diplomat, sondern auch ein Dichter. Bleiben Sie gesund und schauen Sie wieder rein bei Europa in der Corona-Krise. Wie entwickelt sich die Europäische Union hier in der Reihe aus der Hessischen Landesvertretung? Bleiben Sie gesund.